The Yanyin Carmen. Let's talk about it. It's a beautiful set, right? 10 BA driver IEM with an absolutely gorgeous cable and gorgeous faceplate. Problem, it costs $849 and has some faults that I want to get into and talk about. The shells are fantastic. They look really nice. They remind me a great deal of the Zigat shells, like the Zigat, like Cinco Tres and Da Cinco, or the Jay's Australia. So they're fine shells, but they don't really have a good wing, but they do have a nice metallic tip and filter, which is good for people that need it. It is a smaller shell, it is slight, it is not huge, it is not ill-fitting, and it is pretty normal and slight for most people, despite it being larger than the Magic One. I did not have fit problems on this IEM and found it rather dainty in ear and chill in ear to listen to. I like the faceplate. I like the style and design of it. And I think, it has a nice little, metallic ear tip so it can hold ear tips well. The faceplate is very beautiful and I like it a lot. I think the shell of this IEM is fine. Not perfect, but again, what is for something sticking in your ear? The best part of this IEM is the cable. This thing is fantastic. Look at that thing. It's chunky, it's thick, it's beautiful. I have no major problems with it. It has a nice chin slider. It feels really good on skin. And it looks absolutely gorgeous when you look at it. It has a nice chin slider that stays in place, nice metallic feel to it. Again, this is a premium cable that I absolutely love. I would say this cable is maybe a $100 to $200 cable and is just fantastic. Flat 2-pin connector as well. You can buy this on Linsol. One thing to note that it doesn't have a multiple swappable termination, which is kind of disappointing, but I think in some ways that's a good thing because it gives you a sturdy cable that doesn't have fault, comes in every single termination you could want. Now the accessories are bare bone. I did want to show you this photo. It does come with a little pouch. A pouch on a $850 earphone doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It feels cheap. There are nice pouches out there, or nice carrying cases you could get. Even something like Thea used on the Origin, like a little felt cup. Something simple is very possible in the realm of 10 to 15, maybe $10 to $50, if that. I feel like the pouch is almost an afterthought, and it's disappointing. Packaging is a little bit lackluster, although, again, fantastic cable and beautiful faceplate. Look at that. That is a beautiful graph. Now, it's interesting. There's a few faults that it has. A little bit early 1K rides, a little bit of a dip here, and a little bit of a significant dip in the treble. It's funny to me that this IEM sounds the way it does in ear, and sometimes graphs are nonsensical of whether an IEM will work for you or it won't work for you. This is one of those IEMs that, despite having a decent graph, and I'll show you kind of what it looks like and reminds me of a few other graphs here in a moment, and having good channel matching, it's kind of peculiar and it just doesn't work for me. It doesn't resonate for me in what it does. So a few to look at, like one that this reminds me of just a little bit would be Jay's Australia. Now, you notice that Jay's has a little bit more bass, a little bit less of that upper mid range. So, if we normalize this at, say, let's do this real quick. Normalize this at 500. You'll see how much more bass that Jay's Australia has, and that's important to note. If we look through here, you notice they both kind of have that peak right around 4K that kind of exaggerates soundstage. But Jay's Australia kind of goes a little bit in the V direction, whereas the Carmen is a little bit more neutered in that treble approach. But when you get to that upper air is really where I think some of the difference makes. I mean, again, I don't know. I think I did a hearing test and I can hear it about 17K. I maybe even heard some things at 20K when I crank my amp up, but I don't really think that's healthy. My hearing's good and I can hear a lot of things up in this region. But if you take that this is a logarithmic scale, this is 1K, which is basically at the halfway point. And then 6K is already at the almost 3/4 point. So you really don't you get some information here, but it's kind of trends. To me, something like the Australia has just better extension and it overall sounds much better in ear. And I can't really recommend the Carmen when something like the Australia comes out. It's almost like they were almost going for a similar tuning philosophy, but the Australia is a better pick by far in my view. Another one to look at is the U4S. You'll notice a little bit less 1K energy. I mean, bass level is about the same, which is not a big deal. And then the treble extension here on the U4S, it has a lot of energy around that 15 to 20K, kind of exaggerated level. And for me and for my ear, I really like that. Like I'll show this to you in another graph where it has a little bit of energy here. And for some reason, I find myself liking graphs that have that much energy. So I think that's kind of just something to note. Another one to look at is, say, the Afu Cantor. Now, this is another around $800 IEM, right around that same price. It's even cheaper. I think the accessories and packaging are much better with a better case. And I think, faceplate's about the same. A lot of that stuff is debatable, but I really like the Cantor. And to me, the Cantor, despite having a little bit of energy in this 4 to 6K region, it's still cohesively and has a great musicality that I enjoy a lot more. Let's go back to the U4S. And again, U4S, you can find this for around $740 B stock, like here. Around 1111, you're going to see some great B stock sales, and I encourage you guys to wait for that. If you're really looking at maybe a big purchase and save some money, or maybe go used market. But if you can wait and it's not much more, the B stocks can be absolutely fantastic and a really good way to go. Another one to look at that I've reviewed on channel that's almost the exact same price, released at almost the exact same time, the Thea Audio Origin. Now, the Origin has better bass. It has better upper mids, it has better air and extension. I like the Origin. I mean, the Origin has some faults in its details not being as pristine and clear and perfect. But the Carmen has multiple issues to the point where I can't recommend it. Does that mean that maybe it could work for you? It's possible. What's coming into my ear is not this frequency response, at least for up to here. And again, it could be the fault of the lack of energy in the air that make it just not a good IEM. This is kind of where I rank the Carmen, somewhere around the EDC Pro or the Krilla. Faulted, problematic, sometimes okay on songs, but nowhere nearly worth the price. If you're gonna get the Carmen, I recommend some EQ. I've tried it with EQ and improved it much more. It felt like just a lot more simple, pure, and clean. But again, when you have a $850 IEM, you shouldn't have to EQ. You really shouldn't even have to EQ past maybe 200, in my opinion. But it can improve certain things and make an earphone and the experience more enjoyable. The Yanyin Carmen. I don't know, something about its tonal balance feels off, but I just didn't really like its tone. It needed a ton of EQ, and I felt like its technicalities were really just okay. It's just one of those tunes that it didn't hit the mark for me. It didn't have very good bass. Its mids were a little bit scooped. Its highs were not there, and its overall didn't have a sound signature that I can recommend. It had decent bass and note weight. It didn't image super well. Like, it felt like, there were certain things that did not exactly work for me, and we'll talk about that in the music section. Its resolution and detail, while being okay, didn't feel pristine, clean, and clear. It felt like it had a good sense of soundstage because of the way the upper mids work, but it had some faults, and it just doesn't get a recommendation from me. So let's talk music. I wanted to use music to explain why I didn't like this IEM and to give more detail rather than just talk about a few minor things. But it lacks that specialness from an IEM that I would want. The string section from, say, Marriage of Figaro is just unbearable from the get-go. It's just horrible. When I look at, say, O Mia Babino Caro, there's something unbalanced. Vocals feel overemphasized despite it not showing up on the graph. Like it lacks that treble bite and energy and emphasis, and it's not really great. When I tried cranking the volume, not getting enough details, its tonal balance felt off, and it felt like one of those sets you have to listen to with low volume or get EQ to make it work. In Verdi Rigolo, it just felt old. Like, I can't explain it. Some tracks, especially in classical music, they need a certain sense, a certain tonality, and a timbre to make them really work. And it just felt like an old IEM. While its treble and air feels dead, it's an odd sensation. It's just, a messy tonal balance. The drum section in Iron Man, it felt like it almost had too much resonance, and it didn't really work for me. I Will Survive, while it lacked a little bit of incisiveness, it seemed plain and okay, but it was just kind of a sad experience overall. On the Smiths, it actually worked. I'll give it that. I'll give it a solid, 8 out of 10. Even despite this being what I call a poor IEM, on this track it really worked, and it was a lot of fun. The opening sequence of Jump, man, it was so off. It was unlistenable, unfun, blarg, dead. The drum hits on Dicky Titan felt puny, off. I mean, there's this big thing where some of the guys of later calling things a headache. I'm not going to call this a headache inducing. I am going to call this something that I personally didn't jive with. Personally, that even if someone gave me this set, I'd probably just kind of throw it in a bag and leave it with all my other samples that I never listened to. It's not a great set, and it's not something that I would recommend to people at its price or at any price. The Yanyin Carmen. I think some people are going to jive with this. Some people are going to like it. If you want to know my current recommendation, you got to listen to this guy at a show before you buy it, or in a store first. I can't even. It has some redeemable qualities. It's not terrible. From some songs it worked, but I would say maybe 15% of my library, I found myself really toe tapping and feeling that this was a musical sounding IEM. I don't say these things to brand fight or to cause disruption in the hobby. I'm just trying to share my opinion on this IEM, which I find being really beautiful and having a great cable, but sonically it doesn't work for me, and I find myself enjoying stuff like, the Truth Theory Hexa for $79 more than this, and I think that's a problem. I think, I think it's still a valid concern to say that I don't find this IEM overly musical and detail focused, and I think this is for a tuning for somebody that maybe wants this tuning. This could be good. But for me, I have to be clear that I don't like it. And that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day. You're still here. It's over. Go home. Go watch another IEM video. It's done. That's the entire video. What more do you want?